You feel it, don't you? That deafening silence. The unanswered prayers. The closed doors. The isolation so loud it hums in your soul. You wonder, has God forgotten me? But what if I told you, this silence isn't abandonment. It's assignment. Chosen one, sit with me. Let's go deep. Let's talk about the sacred silence that surrounds those whom God is about to launch. Because not every silence is punishment. Sometimes, silence is God's signature. You've been praying, haven't you? Fasting, seeking, crying out. And all you hear is nothing. But that nothing is not empty. It's full of purpose. You're in the wilderness. But wilderness isn't a wasteland, it's a womb. A place of transformation, of preparation, of becoming. Do you remember Moses? 40 years. In silence. Tending sheep in the backside of the desert. No burning bush. No splitting seas. No commandments. Just silence. And you think you've been left behind. Chosen one, sometimes God puts distance between you and the world not to punish you but to preserve you. To detox you from the noise. To strip away what can't go with you where you're going. You've been trying to hold on to relationships God already let die. Trying to restart conversations heaven ended. Trying to force your way into rooms God never intended you to enter. And now, it's quiet. Not because you're lost, but because you are being found. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. Chosen one, when God is silent, it's not because He has nothing to say. It's because He's watching how you listen when heaven is mute. Will you still trust Him when He doesn't respond? Will you still follow when there's no map? Will you still worship when there's no applause? God's silence is never passive. It's precise, strategic, surgical. Because He knows your next season can't be built on constant reassurance. It has to be built on unshakable trust. He's not giving you more signs, because the silence is the sign. You've been left behind. No, you've been set apart. Let me say that again. You've been set apart. For what? For greatness that can't be manufactured. For influence that can't be copied. For anointing that costs more than talent can afford. And that's why He pulled you away. You thought you were rejected. But you were really protected. Protected from distractions. From false affirmation. From the kind of success that explodes before it matures. God doesn't rush royalty. David was anointed in front of his brothers, then sent back to sheep. He didn't wear the crown until years later. Why? Because the silence between his anointing and his appointment was the soil where his spirit grew strong. Chosen one, what is growing in your silence? Bitterness? Or faith? Disappointment? Or depth? Your answer determines how you'll handle what's coming next. Don't despise the silence. Don't curse the cave. Because that's where God hides kings before He reveals them. The silence is sacred. It's where your ears tune into what most people can't hear. The whisper of direction. The breath of vision. The stillness where identity is forged. Everyone else is chasing platforms. You're being prepared for purpose. Everyone else is building visibility. You're being built in invisibility. Because real glory doesn't start in the spotlight. It starts in the shadows. Where only you and God walk. Where there's no cheering crowd. No stage. Just obedience. Just whispers. Just silence. But chosen one, Don't misread the silence as distance. It's proximity. It's intimacy. God is closer than ever. But He's not talking loud. Because He wants you to lean in, to come close, to grow sensitive. This kind of intimacy can't be learned in public. It's cultivated in private. So let me ask you again. What if the silence is not a problem? What if it's the proof? Proof that God is separating you for something sacred. That's why they don't call you. That's why you don't fit in. That's why you feel so detached from the rhythms of the world. You were never made for normal. You were crafted for consecration. God breaks the rhythm of the world to make you dance to the beat of heaven. And yes, it's lonely. Yes, it's heavy. But chosen one, if you can endure the season of silence, if you can sit in it without sabotaging your future, if you can stay faithful when nobody claps, then you'll emerge with something nobody can steal. An authority born in the quiet. A fire that doesn't need fuel. A confidence that doesn't require compliments. Because your identity won't be rooted in applause. It'll be rooted in the still voice that whispered when everyone else was silent. You're mine. You're ready. You're chosen. That whisper is enough. You feel it, don't you? That ache of isolation. The silence. The unanswered prayers. You've looked around and wondered, where is God in all of this? But let me tell you something, chosen one. The silence is not the absence of God. It's the very proof that you're being set apart. You see, the wilderness has always been God's sacred classroom. Moses heard God not in the palace, but on the backside of the desert. Joseph didn't dream in Pharaoh's court, he waited in prison. And David, he wasn't crowned in the temple. He was anointed in obscurity. So why do you think your silence means abandonment? Why do you think the isolation is punishment? It's not. It's protection. It's purification. It's preparation. You're not alone because you're forgotten. You're alone because you've been chosen. Listen closely, this part is critical. When God is about to use someone powerfully, He first hides them completely. You think Jesus just appeared on the scene at 30 years old with miracles in hand. No. There were 30 silent years. 30 years of being a carpenter. 30 years of obedience in obscurity. And then, the heavens opened. Do you understand now? What you're calling abandonment is heaven's seal of distinction. What you call a delay is actually divine design. You've been marked, and because of that mark, not everyone can walk with you. Not everyone can understand you. Not everyone can follow you into the season. So stop trying to explain your silence to noisy people. Stop apologizing for your isolation. God doesn't anoint in the crowd. He anoints in the cave. He speaks in the quiet. He breaks you in secret so He can raise you in power. You've cried, haven't you? Late at night, wondering why everyone seems to be moving forward while you're standing still. Why the doors aren't opening. Why your prayers hit the ceiling and echo back with nothing. But that echo, that very silence, is God speaking louder than ever before. He's saying, be still. Be separate. Be mine. Because when you're chosen, your process is different. Your pain is deeper. Your pruning is sharper. Your silence is longer. But oh, chosen one, your oil will be purer. Your fire will be brighter. Your assignment will be greater. So stop fearing the quiet. Stop resenting the solitude. This is not the end. It's the holy beginning. The sacred stripping. The divine detachment. God is not ignoring you. He's consecrating you. And soon you'll look back at the season and realize it wasn't silence. It was separation. And that separation was the signature of your calling. Let me ask you this, chosen one. What if God's silence was his loudest act of love? What if the silence isn't punishment, but preservation? What if this weight you're feeling is not a burden, but glory in disguise? Remember Elijah? He stood in the cave, waiting for God, and the wind blew. But God wasn't in the wind. The earth quaked. But God wasn't in the quake. The fire roared. But God wasn't in the flame. And then, a whisper, a still small voice. That's the voice that breaks chains. That's the voice that anoints kings. That's the voice that silences hell itself. So, what are you waiting for? The thunder? The lightning? The stage? No, chosen one. You're being taught to hear the whisper. Because the whisper is for the intimate. The whisper is for those who have endured the silence long enough to finally hear heaven's breath. You've been conditioned by noise, but called to intimacy. This season is not just to build your strength. It's to sharpen your hearing. God is not building a platform under you. He's building a sanctuary within you. And sanctuaries are not built in crowds. They are carved in caves, formed in fire, laid stone by stone in secret. So yes, it's heavy. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, it's quiet. But that's because you're being entrusted with glory, and glory weighs more than gold. Glory demands silence. Why? Because noise dilutes, but silence distills. This is your Gethsemane. This is your hidden hour. But hidden doesn't mean forgotten. It means favored. Jesus said, "My soul is overwhelmed to the point of death." And he sweat blood in silence. Not in front of the crowd, but alone, under olive trees. And what happened next? He rose. He fulfilled. He conquered. Do you see the pattern now? Silence. Suffering. Then, sovereignty. That's the rhythm of the chosen. So no, you are not behind. You are not cursed. You are not lost. You are positioned. You are planted. You are protected. And when the silence lifts, the roar of your purpose will echo across generations. Because when the chosen rise, they don't speak. They thunder. So keep walking through the silence. Keep worshiping in the stillness. And know this: the silence is sacred. The silence is strength. The silence is God. Chosen one, have you noticed? The quieter heaven becomes, the louder your battles grow, the louder the doubts, the louder the attacks, the louder the lies. But let me tell you this truth. Hell gets loud when heaven is about to move. Your silence isn't a sign of defeat. It's a sign of spiritual threat. The enemy isn't attacking you because you're weak. He's attacking you because you've been set apart. You're marked. You carry something eternal. You carry a promise, a fire, a destiny. So, in the silence, he whispers, he twists, he manipulates your mind. God has forgotten you. Your prayers aren't working. You're wasting your life in isolation. But what if I told you the silence is actually the sound of God drawing his sword? The hush before heaven's thunder. The stillness before the breakthrough. Remember Job. He lost everything: family, health, wealth. And God said nothing. Not for days. Not for weeks. Not for chapters. But Job still worshipped. He tore his robe. He cried in the dust. But he never cursed his God, because Job understood. Silence is not absence. It's testing. It's training. It's trust. God was proving Job to the world, to the accuser, to the heavens. And when the silence lifted, God spoke out of the storm. Chosen one, don't mistake the storm for separation. It's a setup. It's a signal. Heaven is about to speak. You may be alone. You may be broken. You may be misunderstood. But you are not forsaken. You are not forgotten. You are not finished. Because when God breaks his silence, he restores double. He heals fully. He sends fire. So right now, even in the silence, hold your ground. Guard your heart. Sharpen your sword. The enemy thinks you're abandoned, but he's wrong. You're just being calibrated for glory. Chosen one, let me ask you a question. What sound does a seed make when it's breaking underground? What noise comes from a caterpillar inside the cocoon? None. But transformation is happening. Powerfully. Silently. So why do you judge your season by what you can hear or see? Why do you fear that because it's quiet, God is not working? I'm telling you now. Some of God's greatest miracles happen in silence. Some of the most divine shifts make no sound at all. You want noise? But heaven is calling you to notice the unseen, to trust the invisible, to believe the inaudible. Because that's what faith is. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith doesn't require volume. It requires vision. Look again. In the silence, your character is being formed. In the quiet, your spirit is being shaped. In the stillness, your roots are growing deep. You think nothing's changing, but the angels are watching. Heaven is recording. God is weaving eternity into your every moment. You want a sign? The silence is the sign. The pain is not wasted. The weight is not empty. The silence is sacred. And here's the truth. The quieter the season, the greater the glory. David was silent in caves before he sang on thrones. Joseph was silent in dungeons before he spoke in palaces. Jesus was silent on the cross before he cried, "It is finished." Chosen one. Silence precedes the shout. Always. So do not fear the season. Do not rush it. Do not resent it. Because in the soundless dark, God is resurrecting your purpose, breathing on your bones, preparing your name for nations. You think you're just surviving, but heaven is staging a divine unveiling. And when the silence breaks, when the trumpet blows, when the voice of God shatters the stillness, you will not walk out. You will rise. You will roar. You will carry the sound of the unseen, the weight of glory, the mark of the chosen. Because those who endure the silence with worship are trusted to carry the sound of heaven.